there was a millionaire and a billionaire that got into an argument, and the billionaire ended up winning, and the millionaire Scott Demore ended up going home.
What's going on, wrestling fans? It is I, Steve Fall. Welcome to 10 Cal Media. On today's edition, I'm talking to the voice of a generation. It's David Penzer. How are you doing today?
I'm feeling old. What's with this voice of a generation? You're not wrong, but I'm doing great. Thank you.
Again, sitting at ringside, Volume 2, XWF, TNA, all this good stuff. You had Volume 1, now you have Volume 2. So many great stories are going to be in this book. And, doing research on XWF as well, it's so funny because with Hulk Hogan's involvement, now, obviously, we're not going to give away too much in the book, but with Hulk Hogan's involvement in this, do you feel like this had legs until it seems like the WWE decided to go, oh, wait, there's something going on over here? Let's pluck, let's pluck, let's pluck, let's pluck. Is that how you feel about this?
That's a part of it. Certainly, that's a part of it, a big part of it. The other part, which is basically when Turner Broadcasting got rid of their wrestling content, basically just took it off the air one Monday on in Panama City, and it was never to be seen again. Um, it was still getting good ratings. The company was losing money, but as far as a television entity, Nitro um, and Thunder were still getting top 15, top 20, weekly cable ratings, which is not to sneeze at.
No.
So all of a sudden, when uh, they dropped what other television executives saw as a good television product, and they just dropped it for nothing. Um, they didn't try to sell it. They didn't try to, hemorrhage it. They just got rid of it. All of a sudden, these TV network executives are going, all right, they must know something that I don't know, because why would they have done that? And it's the same reason why TNA had to start on pay-per-view, because there was a real hesitancy for cable executives to take a chance on wrestling based on the fact that Turner had thrown it away when it was still a good entity for them.
Right. Yeah. And Guy Evans's book, who also is part of this book as well, has shined a lot of light on executives
Yeah.
and AOL and Time Warner being really the death of WCW. But personally for you, what do you believe is the death of WCW? The documentary came out. It kind of gave a few answers here and there, but personally for you, what do you think it was?
Well, I mean, once Turner lost his power because he sold to Time Warner and then AOL and uh, whatever the other company was, and once he lost his 51% voting power, nobody ever wanted wrestling in that company. They all hated it. If it wasn't for, and that's very documented in my book and in Guy's book and in Eric's book, and I mean, pretty much worldly recognized that without Ted Turner's dedication to pro wrestling, they would have gotten rid of it probably before I even had a chance to get there in 1990. But once he lost the power and they were losing money, and I always had a bad feeling about Brad Siegel, and that documentary kind of sealed the deal, where
Hmm.
he basically admitted that he just got tired of it and you know was too much hassle. I always had an idea for that. We even talk about it in my first book before that series came out, uh, Sitting Ringside Volume One. But uh, which is also available, by the way, at davidpenzerbook.com and at Amazon. But yeah, so I'm not going to put the blame on Brad Siegel. It was a dysfunctional situation in corporate media, but Brad could have saved it and chose not to many months earlier than the decision was made.
Right. And it's so weird because, it surfaced years ago, but there's a video. So when Nitro has its last episode, well, there's actually one more WCW produced product. It happens on a Saturday. And it's Mike Tenay sitting there, and I forget who else was there. And they're talking about WWE buying WCW. And for years, all of us thought Nitro was the last thing we ever could see in Panama City. And nope, there's one more little piece of WCW. And it's so strange that for years, like 20 years, we all thought one way this was the end. But It's so weird with WCW because for years, WCW kicked the crap out of the WWE and it was number two and number one. But yet, the WWE always has ECW nostalgia shows since the closing. Why do you feel like WCW never gets the love from at least the WWE who purchased all of the rights to it?
Um, well, ECW is a very, that's a really good question because I was going to say ECW is a very dedicated fan base, but there's obviously a very WCW dedicated fan base that yearns for a revisit of that, not permanent one, but it's special. That might have been Vince, saying, you know what, I killed it and I'm not bringing it back. Maybe that'll change under Paul. Triple H.
Yeah.
I don't know. But that would be fun to do a one night only type thing for sure. And I think it would cause I think there would be a lot of interest in it based on, Guy's book and the docu-series and that people keep talking about this because there was never an ending. So maybe if they did a one night only and they, said farewell in the right way, perhaps people could put an end to their grief or their confusion or whatever the emotion was. But it came out of nowhere. So, there's still a lot of people wanting to know a lot of answers. Obviously, Guy's book is the encyclopedia for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, Eric's book and mine as well, volume one, have give insight, that people that were there working in the company saw me and Eric that Guy, wasn't there for. But if you want the encyclopedia, man, it's the Nitro book by Guy Evans. He's the best author in the business right now, and
Yeah.
blessed to have him interested in my story.
Yeah, he's one of the best. I've known him for a few years now, and a great guy as well. With this book, though, obviously, when your first one, a lot, obviously, with WCW stories will be everywhere for the rest of life. But recently in the WWE, they won't stop talking about the hatred between Goldberg and Bret Hart, or more, the hatred of Bret Hart towards Goldberg. You were there. The kick happened. It ends Bret Hart's career. Are you shocked that still to this day, 20 years later, Bret is still angry at Goldberg, and now the WWE is bringing this up on television?
When have they brought it up on TV? I followed their TV. I don't watch all of it because I don't have time. But when have they brought it? I know I've seen it on like uh, on Twitter,
Yes.
but I've not heard it on TV. When have they brought it up on TV? Just out
So
of curiosity.
Bret Hart a few months ago, they were in Canada for an episode of Raw. They brought Bret Hart out. Gunther, their champion, came out and he brought up how
That's right.
he always looked up
I
to Bret
saw
Hart.
that.
Yeah, he always
That's
looked up to
right.
Bret Hart,
I saw
but
that.
Goldberg was his favorite. And then in Atlanta, Goldberg was a special guest in the audience. They brought him in, and the same exact thing. Gunther brings up Bret Hart, and still they're now because they know the internet is all about this. So are you shocked that Bret is still angry at Goldberg? I think I would be too, but like we're to the point of like he will not start bringing it up in any interview, and now the WWE is like, oh, let's use this too.
Some people hold a grudge and some people don't. I tend not to for the most part, although there's a few people there that, and one we talk about at the end of the book where I might choose to hold it for a little while longer. But uh, but yeah, Brett, I guess Brett can't let it go. Bill, look, I know Bill well. I have, haven't really, I got to know him well in WCW, let's say that.
Mm.
And he really doesn't have uh, a bad bone in his body. He's
Right.
very protective of his image, as are most of these top guys, and and his legacy, and his family. But no, he would have never set out to purposely, do to Brett what happened to Brett. That was just an accident. And I don't know what more Bill could do. I don't know if they tried talking it through, but right now, obviously, if the social media is still popping for it, then they're going to use it in storylines. How mad he really is, I don't know. I don't think he's happy. I don't think it's one of those things where he's been able to see Bill and give him a hug and say, "Hey, no hard feelings." But perhaps I'm wrong on that, and perhaps he's just one of those guys that can't let go.
Yeah, I would understand like your career. You're the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. You've had a Hall of Fame career, and then you are angry at a man who maybe possibly wasn't trained properly. I don't know. It was an accident. Accidents happen in professional wrestling, and it
A, lo-
happens.
lot of
happened.
things happened to him in a short period of time. He lost his brother in a tragic accident. Um, uh, and then he got the screw job deal done. Then he came to WCW, and that run didn't exactly go well from the get-go. And he's still pissed off about the screw job and about Owen. Uh, and now things in WCW aren't going well. And then to top it all off, in a period of 4 years now, you've gone from your brother dying in a horrible accident, getting screwed out of what was important to you, which was to win in Canada, and then not things not going well in the new company, and then getting kicked by a wrestler by
Right.
accident, and then having a stroke. So that's a lot to handle in a short amount of time, relatively a couple few years. So perhaps it's just something that he can't get over, and everybody each their own.
Of course. Yeah. I was always, it's always interesting because some people from WCW, each have perspectives of what happened there. And, Bret, you brought up the Montreal Screwjob. Screwjob happens, then 1997 Starrcade happens. The two biggest events in professional wrestling in that era happened pretty much back to back. In Starrcade 97, we're actually about to celebrate 26 years since Starrcade 97, where Sting beat Hogan and Bret Hart was coming down in the fast count and the controversy. Can you take me through your feelings of that day? Because Eric Bischoff has talked about it, other people have spoken about this. What were your thoughts on the reasoning behind the finish to Starrcade 97 between Sting and Hogan?
I didn't realize there was a bad finish. I didn't even know about that, until like years later after WCW was out of business. That Nick Patrick, when I started to realize it, I was doing my podcast, which was also called City Ringside at the time, and people started talking about the fast count that wasn't fast. And so Nick's a friend of mine. His dad, uh, um, Jody Hamilton, the masked assassin, was, without him, I wouldn't be in this business talking to you about the wrestling business. So I had him on my podcast, and he had never talked about it before. And basically, I'd never really even realized this was going on. He, was by one side was telling him to count fast, the other side was telling him not to count fast. According to him, he couldn't find the guy that could give him a direct answer, who was avoiding him. And so he decided to do it down, sort of a little bit fast, but not ridiculously fast.
Right.
And because of that, I didn't realize anything went wrong. Uh, so what became a big deal years later and decades later at the time to me was just another night.
Yeah, because it was not another night for wrestling fans, massively confused on what happened because we're like, wait a minute, he didn't like you watch enough wrestling, you realize, okay, well that wasn't a fast count, but they're saying it was. So what has happened here, and here we are today, 26 years later. I'm still talking about it. Eric Bischoff
Yeah.
keeps getting asked about it, where Eric Bischoff actually said, he's like, we didn't think Sting looked into it. Hogan also felt like he didn't feel like Sting was like excited about what was about to happen. 2 years build, and then it all gets kind of ruined in like seconds with a miscount. And
I don't know if I'd
obviously,
use the word ruined. I don't know if I'd
not
use the word ruined. I mean,
it didn't
it
give
definitely
us the
wasn't
satisfaction we
I don't think it
wanted, I
was the
guess.
I don't think it was the satisfaction to the 2 year build that everybody wanted. Um, maybe Hulk realized that when he put Goldberg over clean in the middle of the ring and tried to make it right. At least realizing that he probably should have done that with Sting. I don't know. That's just conjecture. But look, I knew that there was they were claiming there was a fast count that didn't look fast to me, but I didn't know about the push and pull with Nick Patrick until years later.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, because you always hear of like the
He
boys
never
being
he never
worked.
mentioned it. He never mentioned it to anybody. I could see Nick being in and around the business his whole entire life, saying, "All right, well, why am I going to say something? If I say something, I'm gonna piss one person off." Finally, 25 years later on my podcast, he didn't give a shit. But uh, at the time, there was a lot of egos involved and a lot of stuff going on. And if it was me, I wouldn't have said a thing. And nobody asked him about it. They just went on and moved forward with what it was, which was a supposed fast count that wasn't fast. So I kind of thought Nick just screwed up and forgot he was supposed to count fast. So we
I
just we
like
just went on to we just went
right.
on to the next city, man.
Of course. No, no, of
I
course.
know
That,
in
that
hindsight
that's the
it's
thing too. Is like I'm watching from my television, you're watching from ringside, sitting ringside. So like what's happening in my perspective and eyes is not the same, obviously, as an employee of the company who's like, well, that happened. Break down the ring. Let's go to the next town. Versus
yeah.
I'm like, you're on the chats in 1997 where it's for internet sort of a thing where you're like, this is crazy. Can you believe this happened? Like, endless amounts of speculation of what's going on. And here we are 26 years
Yeah,
later.
I mean, in hindsight, it seems crazy to say it was just another night, but really, we were running hard, man. I was on the road 25 days a month, and it I look back and wonder how I was able to do that, and it wasn't even hard. When I before I finished up with Impact last year, at the end of last year, I was getting real tired of the travel. Now it helps to be automatic first class when I was at WCW upgrades, and not having to go through uh, security because that was before 9/11. But still, it's man. I don't know. Nobody's called me and given me an offer, for anything weekly or monthly or on a regular basis. I get calls for, shows and conventions and stuff, and that's fine. But I don't know if I could do the travel again on a regular basis. That was really taking a toll on me at the end of my run.
Well, yeah, I can imagine going across the world, especially during tough times. Now, Guy Evans sent me a couple pages of your new book, and he's like, "Oh, do you want to check out this?" Oh, yeah, of course. He's like, "All right, cool." So the subject line was Chris Benoit, and so I read the whole section of it. And tell me your thoughts on how that incident, that horrific day and week, month, feels like years now, affected the wrestling world we live in today because that was a horrible, horrible time. And now everyone is very cautious of what they put in their bodies and what they do, anything like that. Can you explain to me the situation you were put in that day and then how it has affected wrestling in today's world?
Well, I wasn't put in anything. I knew in my gut from the time I heard it that that was an internal thing. That I didn't know who killed who or how what the circumstances were, and I don't know that we'll ever know that. I'm not trying to insinuate that Chris didn't kill Nancy and Daniel. I'm just saying at the time I knew that it wasn't a break-in. I knew that it wasn't an outside source. I knew that whatever happened in that house had gone down, and it was the three of them. And and it really surprised a lot of people. I can remember having Jericho on the phone, talking him down for like 2.5 hours, trying to explain to him the things I saw that he didn't see. The cracks that I started seeing, and that they would go to Johnny Grunge for advice because Johnny Grunge was a lovable fuck up, so he didn't judge them. What they didn't know is as soon as they would leave and he fixed everything, that Johnny Grunge would call me and tell me the whole story. So it was never my place to like to go out of my way and say, oh, Chris and Nancy are having marital problems. That's not my place. But when you know the behavior and you've seen the behavior and you've seen the because we socialize with them in a little group down in Peachtree City, Georgia, which is about 30 miles outside Atlanta. There was a whole bunch of us, the Regals and the Finleys and Grunge and his wife and Chris and Nancy and some other there was a cameraman named Darwin and his wife Jill. And so whenever we had a weekend off, we'd go to Chinese food and sing karaoke and drink, or then we'd go with our wives. So I mean, you know, so it wasn't a shock to me. And although he denies it now, if you remember at the when they were filming the interviews, when they before they realized what had happened, Steve Regal says in his interview, I don't want to talk about Chris Benoit, the person. I want to talk about Chris Benoit, the wrestler. I'm convinced, although he denies it, and that's fine. But I'm convinced that he, in his gut, he knew what had happened too, because he had seen some of the craziness that we saw. But Chris was very good at hiding it. And the whole thing was just a devastating situation. How it affects the business now, I don't know if it does. It did certainly in the short term with the Nancy Graces of the world,
Mm.
turn it into I'm not saying something that's not because it was a horrible tragedy,
Yeah.
and there was definitely questions that needed to be answered. But I don't think people like Nancy Grace wanted to answer those questions. I think they wanted to stir the ship for ratings, and I understand that. But it didn't put the business in a good place at that time. People say that he was he was at a point where he was acting like a 97-year-old man because of brain issues or concussion issues. Look, the guy packed his bag every week on a Thursday. He got on an airplane, rented a car, and wherever he landed, he drove to the next town. He drove to the next town. He performed at a high level in the ring. A 97-year-old mentally couldn't have done that. So was there concussion issues? I suppose, but that's not what happened. Chris had demons, and I get into this in the book. And I hated doing this chapter. This is what I dreaded most about this whole experience. 95%, 98% of this experience with Guy has been therapeutic and has really been, I've really enjoyed this. I dreaded, and you could ask Guy, I dreaded it. I even thought about not putting it in the book, but I thought I had information that people might find interesting and valuable. But he just had demons, and those demons cracked one day. And I don't know the specifics of how that happened, but they did. And what happened next was a horrible tragedy that I don't think has affected the business anymore, but did for a long time.
Yeah. And I feel like Chris Nowinski got involved, the Harvard graduate, and also he got CTE and then suddenly NFL. And like there's a lot of obviously more to that, more testing. But you bring up Nancy Grace. She also said on that
Oh,
special that
just real quick.
Owen Hart died of steroid abuse. Owen Hart did not
Yeah.
die of steroid abuse. Like that's what she wrote. And I remember that exact episode.
Yeah, and we get into the whole Nancy Grace craziness. I remember when Finley called me and said he was going on, and I begged him not to. And we get into that, and the interview, and there's audio, not audio. There's the quote, the interview is transcribed in the book, and it was a setup from the get-go. I knew it. I had the because people knew, people all of a sudden started understanding that there was a small group of wrestlers that weren't surprised, and they all wanted to get in touch with us and our families. And I had offers from like NBC, Dateline, NBC, and stuff like that, and I wanted nothing. And to this day, I want no part of it. I talked about it in my book because I thought I should, and I thought that it gave a different perspective that maybe a lot of other people have about the situation. Again, it's just my perspective, but it's an educated perspective. Uh, so, um, so yeah, but Nowinski's done great stuff, man. Chris, when I was in Impact, came and gave a presentation, and there were some wrestlers who are some of the toughest guys in the business. You would know their names and you would understand why, because they do a lot of hardcore stuff that were in tears at the end of that presentation and that adjusted their work and the way they work because of that presentation. He's just done wonderful stuff, and um, the whole thing has evolved to where you need to let the concussion heal. The problem wasn't that people were getting concussions back then. It was that they weren't giving them a chance, and football too, to let them heal. So it was, just like an open wound. You have an open wound, you have a broken arm, and then you break another bone. You don't give it a chance to like, set it and go, let it heal. And so now, that's why people like Tua, the quarterback in Miami, could have such a violent reaction in 3 or 4 times, but still be able to let it heal and come back. Is that a risk? Sure. Life is a risk. Getting on a plane is a risk. Driving in a car is a risk. But he stated he doesn't want to live his life, But now we know these things that we didn't know before, and a lot of it is due to Chris Nowinski. So I give him big props.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super guy.
Yeah, no, incredible. And before we wrap this up, one more question. Since your book already came out, before I assume this would happen, is you were in TNA for a very long time, and Scott D'Amore let go by TNA. Were you shocked by this? The announcement of Impact Wrestling becoming TNA, and then great event, Hard to Kill in January, and then boom, story comes out, Scott D'Amore let go by TNA. Were you shocked by this?
I was floored, and we talk about that. And there's
Oh, there
an
is.
epilogue. Yeah, and I talk about it. Yeah, I was
Okay.
floored. Still surprised, really. Um, you know, he was the heart and soul of that company for so long, and he I know he tried to buy it, and they wouldn't sell it to him. I mean, he really that meant so much to him. And he worked so hard, and making deals and wheeling and dealing and trying to get guys to, work for him as a favor for maybe with, less than they would have worked for somebody else, just because of the connections that he's had and all the people that he's taught over the years and given breaks to. So yeah, I was shocked. I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but you know what? A year later, and they're still going.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that getting rid of Scott was the right thing. Certainly, I'm not saying that. I don't know what the background of the whole situation was, other than there was a millionaire and a billionaire that got into an argument, and the billionaire ended up winning, and the millionaire Scott Demore ended up going home. So I don't have specifics. Nobody really knows.
Yeah.
Good that they've been able to keep it rolling. I don't wish it bad. I wish Scott the best, and he'll always be a great friend and somebody who's like family to me. And I love the company TNA, and talk about it a lot and different iterations of it in the book, Sitting Ringside Volume 2. You go to davidpenzerbook.com or Amazon.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much,
If I,
David, again.
if I
Hey,
could just say, there's tons of other formats in there. Pay-per-views that I've done that I was a part of. There was a 605 pay-per-view reunion, Ted Turner reunion that Jimmy Hart produced, and I worked hand in hand with him. We got that format. I got Ric Flair's last match, the entire show format in there
wow.
as well, never before seen. There's a ton of inside baseball. People really liked it in the first book, and we made sure to save for the second book as well. A ton of inside baseball on the XWF, ton of inside baseball on TNA, and stuff like Flair's last match. Indie shows big that I've done that were consequential, where I just happen to hold on to the format.
Well, it's always good to keep on to that because you can put it in a book and we can buy it for Christmas or buy it for a friend. Use your gift card to buy it after. But again, I said off top, voice of a generation, David Penzer, your book's out right now. You got volume 2 and volume 1 of Sitting Ringside, talking about all your time in professional wrestling before and after and so much more. I got to say, it's always a pleasure talking to you because you always have good stories. So hopefully round 2, when volume 3 maybe comes out someday, we'll wait and
No,
see. We'll wait
no,
and
no
see.
volume. No, I could definitely say there's no volume three. Well,
Uh,
I guess there's a chance, but I doubt it. But yeah, no, but if look, hey, if there's a lot of wrestling books out there, there's a lot of people that are more well known than I am that have wrestling books out there currently that they're plugging. I will tell you that bonus material in the back, the formats and the contracts and the business plans, that's stuff that nobody else has. So if you like that kind of stuff, people like to go, what they say inside baseball, whether it's your political junkie, you like to know what's going on behind the scenes,
oh yeah.
or football in the NFL. But if you're a wrestling fan who likes to see that kind of stuff, this is the perfect book for you. And if you didn't get the first one, it has the last Nitro and so many other early WCW formats from the 90s, and from Disney, MGM, and just some great stuff. So if that's your thing, I encourage you to buy them.
Well, I think that's their thing. And thank you again for being here. I'm Steve. He's David Penzer. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.